What is going on, guys? Papacy back with another video for you guys, and today I'm bringing another episode in our worst Pokemon series. If you guys don't know what this is, basically we talk about a certain Pokemon, discuss if they're a good Pokemon or not. Usually they're a really bad Pokemon, and we'll explain why they are bad. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the Pokemon Castform, which is by far one of the most interesting Pokemon in the game. Now, if you guys are unfamiliar, each of these Pokemon in this series will be rated on a scale 1 to 5 based on offense, defense, versatility, move pool, and viability. If your Pokemon doesn't excel in any of these categories, then it is deemed to be one of the worst Pokemon ever. If one of the Pokemon discussed in this series happens to be one of your favorite Pokemon, I do apologize, but just because you like a Pokemon does not mean it is safe from being in this series. If you guys enjoy the content you want to see more, make sure you leave a like down below and subscribe because it really does help the channel grow, and leave a comment down below letting me know what Pokemon you want to see on this series in the future. But keep in mind, please recommend a fully evolved Pokemon because we are rating these Pokemon from a competitive viability standpoint. Something like a Charmander or even a Bidoof. Yes, they are technically bad Pokemon, but that's because they're not fully evolved, so they're kind of exempt from this series. So like I said earlier in this video, we will be looking at the Pokemon Castform, which, like I said, one of the most bizarre Pokemon ever created. It's a normal type Pokemon with only base 7 in each stat, making it very weak to fighting, immune to ghosts, and resists nothing, unfortunately. Castform also has the very unique ability known as Forecast, which allows it to change its type based on weather, which is a very interesting concept. Castform and Weather were both introduced in Generation 3, so it makes sense that Game Freak would make a Pokemon especially for the weather. Castform also gets the move Weather Ball, which is only a base 50 special normal type move, but it changes its type to match the weather, and it doubles in power if the weather is up, which is very interesting. Also, one thing to keep in mind about Castform is that for whatever reason, Castform does not change forms in Sandstorm. I don't really know why. I guess technically Sandstorm isn't a weather, it's sort of just like a thing that happens. It's not like you don't walk outside and just start sandstorming. You walk outside and it starts raining though, so that's kind of a weird thing. Don't really know why they never did that. So to go on with the positives here, and there really aren't that many, which is pretty typical for this series, I guess. But Castform actually has a pretty decent offensive move pool. It gets a lot of stupid moves. It gets Ice Beam, it gets Blizzard, it gets Energy Ball, Fire Blast, Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball, Solar Beam, and of course Weather Ball, which is actually a pretty okay move. It's also very nice that this thing gets Blizzard, Solar Beam to take advantage of in the respective weathers, which is pretty nice. Now, Castform also gets Rain Dance, Sunny Day, and Hail, which do help it out with Weather Ball, and it gets Sandstorm too, which is something to throw in there, I guess. Sandstorm can also use a Z Crystal with a move like Rain Dance, Sunny Day, or Hail to raise its speed by 1, and then potentially sweep with Weather Ball or something like that. I mean, the thing is, this thing is only base 70 speed. At +1, you're really not that slow, so you could potentially pull off some crazy sweep, however you are really reliant on the weather. And the last positive is it's just a very unique Pokemon. Aside from being a special attacker, there is really no other Pokemon that changes types in the weather, and no other Pokemon that has a move quite like Weather Ball, which is very interesting. Now on to the negatives, and there are more negatives than the positives. Base 70 in every stat is really underwhelming. You lack bulk, you have very little power and speed to go behind it, and I guess the weather boosting moves does help your power a bit because in the rain your water moves will be boosted, of course, but I feel like they made Castform to have low stats on purpose because they were scared it would be too overpowered in the rain or in the sand or in whatever weather it's in. Now, keep in mind, Gen 3 was the first generation to introduce weather, Castform was the very first weather Pokemon they had, so I do kind of understand from the Game Freak standpoint of, let's not make this thing have too high of stats because it does get Weather Ball. Certain moves get boosted in certain weather, so I feel like they were kind of a little too cautious with this thing, which definitely hurt Castform. Although Weather Ball is a cool move as well, you're almost always better off running a different move. Like, for example, in the Hail, you're better off running Blizzard because you're not going to miss your Blizzard, so why would you run Weather Ball over Blizzard in that situation? Although Weather Ball is a pretty cool and interesting move, you're almost always better off running a different move, especially in the Hail. In the Hail, there's absolutely no reason not to run Blizzard. In the sun and in the rain, you can run Weather Ball, however, you could also run things like Solar Beam or even Thunder in the rain, which might hinder your move slot choices because you only have 4, of course. Now, another negative for Castform is you're pretty much almost always better off running literally any other special attacking Pokemon. Yes, it is cool you can change your types and you have Weather Ball and you do have decent coverage, but why would you not just run a different special attacker? Even something like Pyroar, I feel like is infinitely better than this Pokemon. Now, to go on to past generations, you could argue that Castform was a little bit better in past generations, but really not much better. Up until Generation 6, whether that was summoned through an ability like Drizzle was infinite. This is obviously a lot better because then Castform doesn't worry about having limited turns because of the Rain Dance going away. However, there really weren't many options up until Generation 5. Before Generation 5, it was really just Groudon, Tyranitar, and Kyogre. They got weather setting abilities, however, you have no advantage in Sandstorm whatsoever, so that doesn't really matter at all. In Gen 5, you did get things like Drizzle Politoed, which did help out, and in Gen 4, you did get Abomasnow with Hail, which did help out, but at the same time, like, it's really not that much of a change losing that for Castform. Castform was a bad Pokemon then, and it's still a bad Pokemon now. You could make the argument it is slightly better, but it really doesn't matter. So in closing, Castform is a neat little gimmicky Pokemon to use in weather. It could arguably be better in doubles because you do have the partner to set up the rain. I know I didn't really cover VGC much with Castform. There really is no reason to use Castform in VGC. I feel like in VGC, rain or weather in general is a pretty viable strategy, and you're almost always better off running like a Swift Swim Pokemon or a Chlorophyll Pokemon or something like that as opposed to Castform. So to move on to the ratings, in terms of offense, I will give this thing a 2 out of 5. Base 70 is pretty bad, however you are going to be mostly using things in the weather which do help your damage output a little bit. For defense, I'll also give it a 2 out of 5, since 70 in both defenses is pretty bad, however 70 in HP really isn't the worst. It's definitely not the frailest thing we'll cover on this series, but it is far from being the bulkiest thing. For versatility, I'll give it a 1 out of 5, although it is neat that you can change your type in the weather. That doesn't change the fact that Castform is always just going to run 4 physical attacks, maybe a weather or 2 in there. For the move pool, I'll be a little generous and give it a 3.5 out of 5. It has a very, very wide offensive move pool, and I'm very tempted to give it a 4, but since its offenses are so bad, I just can't give it a 4. I do have to give it some credit for the coverage, so I think a 3.5 is pretty appropriate. And last, for viability, I'm just going to give it a 1 out of 5. There's literally no reason why you would ever use Castform over pretty much any other Pokemon that benefits in the weather. So that's it for Castform. Definitely not the worst Pokemon ever, but it really isn't that far off. If you guys enjoyed this series and you want to see more videos like this, make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe. And let me know in the comments down below what Pokemon you want to see on this series in the future. So have a good rest of your day. I will see you guys next time, and bye-bye.